Peter Parker has had it rough the past few months, moving away with his wife only to be brought back to New York. But with the return of his greatest foe, Norman Osborn, things have gotten even crazier. With the loss of his brother and daughter, Peter Parker and his wife Mary Jane must cope with their losses. Between their return to college, Norman Osborn, the Stacy family, new gangs, ninjas, and the Trapster, will they rise above it all or crack under the weight? Welcome to the Forgotten Era, where we'll answer all those questions and more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Forgotten Era podcast. My name is Ethan, and this week I am joined by nobody. That's right, it's just me. If anyone was wanting a solo episode, here it is. Matthew was unable to be on this episode because of work, and I didn't have anybody else lined up, so you're just stuck with me. So I apologize if this is incredibly awkward in any way, because it probably will be. Before we get into this week's book, I have some updates for the podcast. First of all, new microphone. I hope you can tell. I'm hoping it sounds good. It's going to be one of those learning curves where I kind of figure out all the fancy schmancy details because it's a Yeti, so it's got knobs and stuff and different settings, and I don't know. I don't know which one is best, so I will listen to this episode and figure it out next time as well. So bear with me on that. I hope the quality is definitely a lot better. I know last episode, for some reason, it didn't detect my Blue Snowball mic that I was using previously, and it recorded from my headset. And I know that the audio on my part was kind of shitty. So hopefully we can avoid that from now on with this one, because it's a direct, line-in sort of microphone. So fingers crossed. Also, we're changing up the structure of the podcast going forward. The original idea that I had for this podcast was to do every book in release order. So as they came out back in the late 90s, that's how we would cover them on the show. Unfortunately, I don't think that idea really works past the first month. So the books, leading into these new storylines. I think it works for those because most of them are just establishing. But when it comes to the actual story arcs for these individual books, I personally don't think that we should be stretching them out. I was going to try to until I really started thinking about how the next big storyline we're covering is the Savage Land one. And I talked with Matthew. We both don't want to stretch that out over 3 separate episodes. So that's what we're going to do from now on, is just cover each 2 to 3 issue, sometimes 4 issue story arcs in a single episode. That way, A, you get longer episodes, which means more content, which I think is hopefully a good thing, as long as you're enjoying the show. And B, we can get through stuff a little bit quicker, instead of having to be like, oh yeah, what happened last issue? Oh yeah, what happened last issue sort of deal. We can just boom, 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 get through stuff. If a story isn't as enticing as another, it'll be nice to just kind of be done with it and move on. Another thing I have to say is Brad plans on being back for as many Peter Parker issues as he can be on. So he's a big fan, as you could probably tell from last episode, of John Romita Jr., and he seems to enjoy Mackie as well. So we're hoping to have him on pretty much every episode where we focus on Peter Parker from now on. That's another reason why the covering story arcs instead of doing release order is really helpful, because then he's not forced to read Spectacular every single time he's on. So he doesn't have to read 2 books. He can literally just read Peter Parker. Granted, it's not a bad thing if you read Spectacular. It's a great book. But in terms of what I was having in mind and what we've been talking about, is he said whenever we cover Peter Parker, he'd be interested in being on. So just to have Peter Parker episodes only, it would be really great for him. We have one other guest lined up for not the Savage Land story, but the 3-issue story after for Sensational. And I'm really looking forward to that specifically. So as soon as that is 100% confirmed and the episode's coming out, I might tell who it is. Or I might just leave it until the episode comes out as a little surprise. But I am very, very excited for that. It's with someone who directly inspired this show. So that's very cool. I also want to thank everybody who has left more 5-star reviews, just good reviews in general, contacted me directly, given me feedback. I really appreciate that sort of thing. So if you ever want to say hi or tell me anything about the show or anything at all, really, feel free to reach out to me at Bachirimiro on pretty much everything. It'll be in the description of the episode, as always, and on YouTube as well, if you're listening on YouTube. And to those who listen on YouTube, hey, how's it going? Thanks for listening. I guess that goes for everywhere, but I don't know. Wanted to say hi to the YouTube people real quick. I think that is all I have to say, at least establishing. This week, we're going to be covering Amazing Spider-Man 420. This is a kind of a perfect issue to have a solo episode on, because it really is just an in-between issue, another one, I guess, where it's not part of any big storyline. It still follows, the things with the Black Tarantula and Delilah and the Rose, but it's not like super plot heavy. It's just kind of one major thing does happen in it, and then the rest is kind of like a feel-good story. So yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 420. This was released on December 11th, 1996, with a cover date of February of 97. Written by Tom DeFalco, with pencils by Steve Skroce, and the inker was Bud LaRosa. Here we go for the recap. It's Christmas Eve in New York City, and we open up at the West Side Medical Center, where Ben Urich is harassing Detective Garen Lewis, Shirley's ex-husband, owner of the Daily Grind, about El Uno and his affiliation with the Black Tarantula. Before they can reach his room, Uno jumps through the wall and makes his escape. Hiding from the police, El Uno thinks of enacting revenge on Delilah and Spider-Man before robbing 2 homeless men blind of their clothes. If only Ben Reilly was still alive, he would have protected those homeless men. That's a CSC reference to those who get it. Elsewhere in the city, Peter is out Christmas shopping for Mary Jane. He finds a perfect pair of boots, but has to take a step back because, in typical Parker fashion, they're broke. Now more so than ever, with Mary Jane and him going back to school, and Peter being the only one bringing in income. As Peter starts to walk away, he observes a loving family with a baby, and is determined to get MJ those boots. She deserves them after what she went through. Just then, his pager goes off and is summoned to the Bugle. We cut to the Rose in his finest St. Nicholas outfit, who shares his admiration for Christmas time with Delilah. He also gives her a gift, news of El Uno's escape, so that she can get revenge of her own. Cutting back to Peter, he's been tasked with snapping some pics of a psychic giving advice in the park. As Peter approaches, the psychic senses him and asks to pass on the stereotypical superhero fight. Pete's confused by this comment, but he just asks to talk instead. Over in Argentina, Black Tarantula's minion Chespero is setting up a Christmas tree for the holidays. BT does his best Scrooge impression and knocks the tree over, telling Chespero to cut it out and start looking for El Uno. In an effort to escape his fan club, Nate uses his powers to make people think that Peter and him are walking ahead, while they take to the skies. Above a rooftop, Peter finally realizes Nate is a mutant and asks where his sense of responsibility is when it comes to messing with people's minds. Nate uncovers Peter's Spidey suit, stripping him from his civilian clothes, and tells Peter that he doesn't appreciate secrets. Peter agrees to no more secrets, even though he doesn't have much of a choice. Peter explains his origin to Nate and then doubles down on Nate using his powers without asking. This angers Nate, who says they have more in common than Peter might think, grabbing Pete and showing him his origin story. An alternate universe ran by tyrants, as well as the death of Nate's mentor, and Nate's manipulation by the man who killed him. Peter admits to misjudging Nate and asks him to join on the Bugle assignment. All while Nate makes snide remarks about everything in Peter's mind, and Peter hits the awesome Spider-Man PS4 loading screen pose. In another part of the city, El Uno finally makes his move on Delilah, and the two battle it out to the death, while the intercut panels of each page show Peter getting his picks, getting paid with a bonus, and finally buying MJ the boots. Nate joins the family for dinner and leaves after, thanking them for their hospitality. As a thank you, and to put Peter's mind at ease, Nate uses his powers to materialize Aunt May in Peter's mind as a Christmas present. Peter shares his guilt about not being there for MJ in labor and when May was taken from them. Aunt May assures Peter it wasn't his fault and that little May is safe and happy. They'll reunite with her someday. Peter thanks May, and Nate says that he's welcome. The final page shows Chesborough bringing Black Tarantula a Christmas gift from the States, containing El Uno's head and regards from the Rose. So that was the issue, Amazing Spider-Man 420, like I said. And honestly, this is a pretty great standalone issue. It has a lot of iconic imagery, to be completely honest with you. Steve Skroce, I really, really like his art in this issue specifically. Something about it, it's just the way that it looks, the way that he has these really crazy, awesome 2-page splashes later, like when Nate Gray is giving his origin story. You have this super cool picture of Spidey scrunched up on an ornament with a Christmas hat. That's what's going to be used for this episode's picture. So you'll see that specifically. But I really love pretty much everything in this. I love when the Rose is wearing his little Santa Claus outfit and talking to Delilah about El Uno's escape and how she can get her revenge and how much he loves Christmas time. The stuff with Nate Gray is interesting. I'm not a huge X-Men person. I'm pretty sure Nate was an Age of Apocalypse character that stuck, but don't quote me on that because I really have no idea. I know very, very little about the X-Men, to be completely honest with you. I like Gambit, but that's really the only specific character I know about. I do know that Skroce drew the X-Men solo series, though, so I don't know if that's why he's included here. He's in this issue and another one of the Electro issues later, which is also a really great issue. So I don't know if that was a choice that he wanted to do, that they let him do, or if, I don't know, it was just kind of part of pushing Nate Gray as a character at this time. If someone knows, please let me know. I'm very interested to know. But I do really like his purpose in this story. It doesn't feel super shoehorned in. It feels like a legitimate thing. The Bugle would want to cover a psychic in the park, and I like what he contributes to Peter and helping him ease his mind of all the guilt that he feels from Revelations. So that's just those are really great pages. They really hit you emotionally. I love the interaction between Aunt May, quote unquote, and Peter, and just their loving dialogue and the faces. The faces in those pages are just kind of perfect. You can see the love in their eyes and the shock in Peter's eyes, and I really dig that a lot. As for the stuff with El Uno and Delilah and Black Tarantula and everything, this is a great issue that kind of moves that along. We barely knew El Uno, but now, since we've been told he's kind of like one of Black Tarantula's right-hand men, and now he's dead, that's a big deal. The Tarantula is not gonna take that, and he's got some stuff planned for the people in the future. But I really love Delilah's fight against him. It's nice and quick, but the way that it's drawn of just them, they're smashing through buildings and smashing through people's living rooms and just beating the ever living shit out of each other. Uno gets blown up from a petrol truck. He crashes directly into it and explodes. So that's just gnarly. They did not hold back. Delilah wanted that revenge for getting pummeled last issue, and she sure as hell got it by beheading him and sending the head to his employer. That's just gnarly. She's so cool. I mentioned last issue, but I do like Delilah a lot, even though she doesn't really do a whole lot. She's really only in these stories. But I dig it. I just like the way that she's written. I love the way that she talks. her specific word bubbles, just they're so fun. Um, Let me see. Yeah, iconic imagery taken from this. The behind the back web shot that people know and love from Spider-Man PS4 originated in this issue. So that is pretty sweet. It's drawn really well. And I kind of love that when I was going back through these issues for like the first time in a long time, it was after the game came out. So I was like, oh man, that is literally the post from the game. It's such a random issue too to like pull from. Like someone had to have been really fond of this specific issue or this specific era when making the game to be like, yeah, that's one of those poses that we're going to take from. It's that one. Like I mentioned, I love the 2-page splash, or the 2 pages that are drawn showing Nate's origin. It's a bunch of floating heads in fiery hell. I just dig the way it looks. Like I said, the pencils here, and the finishes are just gorgeous, top notch work. I like seeing Scrose's retelling of Peter's origin in one little like panel. I love when, this is like a tangent, but I love when artists get to draw moments that they didn't draw originally. So like Stephen Butler got to do that in Web of Spider-Man. He got to draw some of the Ditko era stuff, and now Scrose does, and Tom Lyle did it in his run on Spider-Man. He got to draw some of like the Kraven's Last Hunt stuff. So whenever people get to do that, I just love that, especially here. It's really great. I like the way that you can always tell when someone is doing the Ditko style Spider-Man. There's always the eyes that change. He's always more scrawny. The spider's different. It's always super obvious, and I really love it, especially here. Seeing something about that in the 90s, like style of coloring and inks and stuff is super cool. Nate Gray strips Peter just on a rooftop. He's really lucky that he had the Spider-Man suit on. I mean, obviously he wouldn't have done that if he didn't know that he had the Spider-Man suit on, but just thinking about if he did, God, what a fucking embarrassing moment for Peter to go through. Yeah. I don't know. There's just something about the Christmas time aesthetic too. I like that. I like that that's the area, like the time that this takes place in, and whether that makes sense or not, like chronologically, I know is kind of like a weird thing on the Marvel sliding time scale, but who the hell cares? You're just reading the comic book. It doesn't really need to matter. I think this is the last time we see Garen Lewis. That's Shirley's ex-husband and Devin Lewis's father, the Daily Grind crew. He first appeared in 414, so that was Delilah's first appearance as well. I think he only appears like 3 or 4 times, and I think this might be his last appearance. He might have one after this, but still, it's I don't know, interesting character that kind of just goes nowhere. Like a lot of things that we've mentioned from this time period, people are introduced, characters are given the spotlight, and then just nothing happens with them, which it happens. You can only do so much, and especially in a time like this when so much is changing, you can't expect characters like Garen Lewis to really matter all too much. He's there to give information, and that's about it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in this issue specifically that's like, oh my god, that's so cool. But honestly, I think I covered it all. Overall, I definitely do. Oh, actually, there is one more thing. The emotional moment with Peter. I love Peter's motivation here. I'm always talking about, or I have talked about on this show, how much I love Peter and Mary Jane moments. And though Mary Jane wasn't directly in this moment, I love Peter's motivation to buy Mary Jane these boots. I love that he loved her so much and just knows the anguish that she went through losing their child, and just wants to buy her some really nice boots to help ease her mind, and just simply because she deserves it. And I love that we have that family with the baby to kind of just really shove in your head and hit home that, yeah, Peter is still fucked up from this loss. Again, one of those things where they're not immediately moving past something from the Clone Saga. They are heavily focusing in on specific things and making sure that you don't forget what happened, because the characters could never forget what happened until they do many, many years later. But at this time, speaking in this moment, it's fresh. It just happened and it's scarring. So I do really love that moment specifically. I think that's about it for this issue. Like I said, a lot shorter of an episode since it's just me and I don't really have anyone to bounce off of. But personally, I would say that I'd probably give this issue about like maybe an 8 out of 10. It's a pretty high one. There's nothing really that I don't like about it. I like the story a lot. I like the art. I like the emotional moments. I like the little fun, like iconic moments, little silly things like Black Tarantula vehemently hating Christmas, apparently really just honing in on that Scrooge mentality, punching Christmas trees and shit. We also get, I forgot to mention this, we get a comment about there are no children here, which is something that'll come back for Black Tarantula. I don't know if that was intentional with that line, but with Tom DeFalco, you never know. But child comes up revolving around Black Tarantula later. But yeah, just a nice, quick, fun issue to go through. And it really gets you in the mood for the Christmas time with the Spider-Man image of him with the Christmas hat and the snow and everything. I don't know. We're getting close to Christmas. That's one of the nicest things about this show, is that we kind of started at the exact right time, because, you know, this era started in October. So we're kind of following along with it as it goes. I love that a lot. So just perfect timing. As well as this issue coming out on December 11th. My birthday is December 12th. So it's just cool to have things associated with this era and everything that's going on. Everything feels like it's meant to be, you know? So anyway, I really appreciate you all listening to this episode. I know it's super short comparatively. It's just kind of to hold you over until we get to the next big episode, which will be the Savage Land story. That would be Sensational Spider-Man 13 through 15. I'm pretty excited to go through it. I know we joked about it last episode, but I'm just kind of, it's such like a weird and zany story overall. I'm excited to see, especially what Matthew thinks about it. I know what I think about it, but we've never really talked about it a lot. So we'll see. We got the Mike Ringo art though. So that I'm very, very excited to look at again and experience. Again, thank you so much for listening. If you want to read certain books along with us, don't forget that Project Rescan exists. I scanned the 30 missing issues from this era. So Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Sensational are the big ones that were missing a bunch of issues. Well, not much Sensational. That only had 3 missing issues, but you get what I'm saying. Feel free to check that out. They're all in CBR format, so if you have a CBR reader on your computer or tablet or phone or whatever it might be, you can read those in high quality. Put a lot of time into that, so I hope you all enjoy it if you do decide to check it out. Scarlet Archives, like I said, a Ben Reilly thing that I started. It's got a ton of stuff in it. If you're ever interested in any of that, feel free to check that out as well. Follow us all on our social medias. I will still put Matt's in the description, even though he's not in this episode, because he's a great guy. And we will see you next time for Sensational Spider-Man 13 through 15, The Savage Land.